We are called to order at 7:04 p.m. Do we have a volunteer to take the minutes?
I can take the minutes.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
So the agenda,
Okay.
one agenda item, is that it? To go over the survey?
Yes, I'm looking for the minutes here for our last meeting. I thought I had those queued and open, but apparently not. Mondays.
Well, it's sometime in 2019.
June 2021.
2021.
That's our last meeting.
That was our last meeting?
That's one. I think that's what I've got. 24th of June, was it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Thursday.
Okay, well, as those are not presenting themselves here quickly, we'll just move on to our next item. And really, this is going to be a pretty brief first item, I think. I think in terms of really reframing the long-range plan, where we're at now is really just at the start of the process. We are just, I think, getting to the point now where I think we can really glimpse where some things are going to fall in terms of what the world's going to look like, probably for like the next year or two, at least, post pandemic. So the question really becomes at this point, do we want to run with the document that we had created and simply adjust that, or do we want to try and just reframe from scratch?
And the document you're referring to is the one that you sent out, right?
The one that I had sent out was the list of questions that is the next subject item.
Right. And you're asking, do we want to go with this as with the suggested revisions, or start from scratch? I guess, is that what you're asking?
Here, let me share over. So this is the current long-range plan, this document here. Was approved in December of 2019, intended to go into effect January 1st, 2020. We had started organizing, getting things going, and then the pandemic arrived.
I'm seeing something different on my screen.
Really?
I've got a magic quadrant for meeting solutions on. Is that, have I pulled something? I might pull something.
I think you pulled something else. So I see the plan.
Yeah.
That's it.
Hold on.
So, I think there's quite a fair number of bits of this that are still relevant. Creating a vision plan, identifying new revenue sources to increase funds, creating the volunteer program, rebuilding the general reserve. I think there's others of these that are a little bit less
Relevant.
Yeah, getting into some of the later goals. Identify various uses for the public PC room. Well, that's been done.
Addressed.
We've done the periodical collection evaluation. Still working on the front desk. A lot of our collection evaluations done. So, it's very much a mixed bag. There's probably 40 to 50% of this that I would say is, in terms of the goals, that is still relevant. I think what's more of a challenge in terms of the relevancy is when we start getting into the introduction, and the other framing paragraphs, talking about the demographics. Well, we've had the census results now, so that we know that those are completely different versus the 10-year projections that we were working with in 2019. The assessment, the statistics, I think for a lot of these 3 years later, and with the pandemic in between, some of the measuring numbers that kind of frame where we are as a library, and frame the discussion as far as where we're aiming to go, are really getting a bit far from when this was originally approved. So I think the better part of valor at this point with this document might be to just start with a new stab at this, and just acknowledge that there was some really unforeseen circumstances that got in the way of this one. But anyway, that's what I've been thinking. I think that's what's going to make the most sense and would create a useful document. I think the framing on this one has just gotten too far from the world as it was when this was originally approved. Thoughts, questions?
I think things that we learned from the surveys with other libraries that we're getting back that would also be of interest there. And I do agree that, yeah, we seem to be in a different mindset a little bit with what's important, what things we have to do, as opposed to amending this particular version. So
yeah, I would tend to agree with that.
Yeah.
So
Does this have to be changed? Real quick question. Does this have to be changed too in light of our efforts and planning with regard to the capital campaign and with Melissa? Because this wasn't contemplated when this was drafted, right?
no,
Right.
It's included in here.
It is. Okay.
Yeah,
Apologize.
but in a different. The campaign's gone through a couple of realignments since this was drafted. So
yeah,
the goals that it has doesn't reflect
right.
what we're aiming for now.
Right. Well, you got to start with the goals.
It's still,
Everything else is derivative, right?
yeah.
Yep.
It's still kind of a moving target too.
Yeah. So I think we can start working on this, and perhaps with a goal here of getting a document to approve towards the end of summer. I think that would be a good target time, because then that would allow us to go through the process of doing the survey, which is going to be getting pulled together the next month or two, and then set up for launch at the start of the summer. And then we aim towards, say, early fall, August, September. We should by that point have a good bunch of data that we can start working with, and that we can then factor into what we're thinking before we finalize our draft.
So
does that sound like that fits with the timeline that you have in mind?
yeah, I mean, before you all got on, Eric, we were talking the survey is every 2 years, but we didn't do it the last time. So it will be 4 years, I think, right? since the last survey?
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll be
Well,
interesting. We should probably really focus on some, well, probably typical questions, but especially around the demographics. So I think it'll be interesting to change. Anecdotally, it seems to me like a lot of the neighborhoods are, a lot of young.
oops.
Everybody else lost Matt too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. They'll be back. He'll hop back on in a moment, I'm sure.
Yeah, I would, I think he started to say that demographics are
Yeah.
evolving pretty rapidly. And those may dictate how we determine what the plan should be for the library.
Indeed.
So agree with that.
Matt says he'll be right back.
Right.
It's a system issue. My comment was just an observation.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's a good observation, and I think it matches what we've been seeing as far as the trends in the census data as it's been released. Okay, Martha, for the timeline, I want to be sure that we're matching up with your thoughts here as well. You had, I believe, been planning for a June 1st release for the survey. Is that correct?
Yeah, June 1st opening and August 31st closing.
Oh, okay. That's later than I thought.
Okay.
Nothing I asked. I thought we ran it for 2 months. Sorry.
No.
So probably more than into autumn next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the survey information.
What kind of response did we get 4 years ago?
4 years ago, typically we've gotten like 220 to 280 responses,
Okay,
somewhere in that neighborhood. I can't remember exactly what it was 4 years ago, but it was definitely within that range.
and how do we disseminate it?
So it's online. We put the link in our newsletter. It'll be in the e-newsletter. I will talk to Glenn at the Village Hall about getting it in the Village's e-newsletter. And then we hassle people at the desk about doing it. By which I mean we hand out little flyers and that kind of thing. We're also going to make completing the survey an activity in our summer reading club this year as a cross promotion.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, basically talk to everyone we can about it.
Yeah, has that been kind of a for prior surveys, kind of the ballpark response numbers wise? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And do we do it in? Are we able to do an analysis of the demographics of those that respond?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Martha always provides us with a nice breakdown of all the different fields that get completed.
You'll get a very long report from me.
That's good.
For the purposes of the minutes, did I miss anything when I was offline?
Just a lot of assignments, Matt.
Okay.
No,
All mine?
yeah, all yours. Yeah.
All yours.
Um,
No,
We
you didn't.
said-
You didn't miss much of anything. I think we all generally agreed with the statement you were making as far as the changing demographics.
Okay.
And I think the census data that we've seen released thus far bears that out as well. So,
Got a projected launch of the survey June 1 with a close August 31.
Thank you.
so, and then we would aim for sometime later in the fall for approval of a new long-range plan, so that we could go through the survey process, get the survey data in hand, and summary information, and then be able to incorporate that into the next document. You know, and the more I think about that too, the more important I really do think that is. You know, that 4 years since the last survey keeps rattling around in my head. That is a long haul between you know, major surveys. We've done little ones here and there. There was the little one we did in 2020 to gauge our services for COVID, but it's mostly been along those lines. This is 4 years since we did the, you know, a full spot check and going through asking about all our services.
You know, in the last 4 years, we've got all new neighbors except for one. So,
Yeah.
well, that, you know, that's just anecdotal, but there's been a lot of shifting around.
And long range strategy will be what, 2023 to 2025? That'll be the next one, 3 years, or do we do it?
Yeah.
We've typically always done 3 years as a strat plan.
Recently, in the not too distant past, we'd been doing 5-year plans, but what we increasingly found was that after the no later than the 3rd year, it wasn't a super useful document anymore. That the reality of the library's operations had moved too far from the where we had been when we were planning. So that was, we kind of shifted, like, well, okay, you know, if it's not meaningful for those last 2 years, then you know, all we're doing is coasting, and let's just, you know, formulate the next plan instead.
Are we using long range plan synonymously with strategic plan?
Well,
Yes.
Yeah.
Should we be? Probably not.
Well, part of I guess, even with whether it's a 5-year or a 3-year, the 3-year plan we've got now is sort of fall into the same situation as a 5-year. Should it be structured in such a way as sort of more of a strategic plan for the next year, with long range as part of that, and this gets revisited after the first year to sort of see how we're doing. So it's a little bit more in touch with what's going on, as opposed to what we're looking at now, which, as we've seen, is there's quite a bit of differences from what we're looking at 3 years ago than we're looking at today.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. And
You know,
go ahead.
My recollection is that we previously argued back and forth about this document, long range versus strategic. And I think what happened was it ended up including elements of both, and being called the long range strategic plan. So sort of this poor fella here, is, as far as a plan, had a bit of a rough time in committee. So I think coming back at it and reframing will be helpful in that front too.
I mean, my recollection was the plan that we went over was very tactical in nature.
Yes.
And not kind of overarching in terms of strategy.
No, it had some elements in there that pointed at creating that overarching, but mostly it was tactical.
Which kind of begs the question, should we do the latter before we do the former?
The strategic before the long range?
Yeah.
That probably makes sense.
I mean, theoretically, that would influence how you roll out a long range plan if you had an overall strategy that everyone kind of bought into. like I said, I don't, what I remember is what we've got is very, very, very tactical in nature.
Okay. So then
Maybe
what we
it's
have
the-
on the,
Yeah,
what we have on the table, under, as far as a plan for moving forward would be, working through the survey process, which will run from June 1st to August 31st, getting that data and then incorporating that into a new drafted first strategic plan, and then using that strategic plan to create a long-range plan. Does that sound accurate as far as the plan that we've got in front of us on the table? And Bill, Matt, does that sound doable? Any suggestions as far as yay, nay, tweaks here or there?
I'll jump in.
Right.
So I think, from a high level, that makes sense, but I think we want to flesh out a little bit more some of the bones around, or add some meat to the bones of like the survey constitution, and then how we're going to, utilize the output of the survey, and then some harder timelines around, if we're going to bifurcate the long range plan into a strategic and a tactical document, when's that going to occur? Because otherwise, I'm looking, we close this August 31st, a month to distill and digest and rewrite everything. Now we're in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And, based on how speaking from my personal experience, the library interviews went, that can be a really tough time to squeeze things in,
Yeah.
Pandemic notwithstanding. So, yeah, I think that, so where I'm getting to specifically there, so like with the survey, if we do a work back on that, if we want to launch this June 1st and tomorrow's February 1st, do we have a draft survey that we're going to, riff on? Is that, Martha, is that something that you spearhead? What does that look like?
Yeah, we'll be discussing that tonight.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to get into that further. Great.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so
Okay.
I didn't mean to jump ahead. I wasn't sure what they ended beyond.
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
You're fine. I think taking a look at the timeline and really, framing, the dates that we want to hit, I think makes a lot of sense. Bill, what do you think?
I've done this a sort of few times just in sort of business where if you can kind of picture like an X matrix, where we have our long-term, what we're looking for long-term on one, say on the bottom, then you have what your short-term for that year is, what are the things you want to get done there. And then you go to the next part, which is then what are the things that have to happen in order to meet your short-term goals. And then it kind of gets broken down into a task type of it. That's probably overcomplicating some different things, but it's almost, I think you've got to, what are the long-term goals, and then how are our short-term goals going to address the long-term goals? And if things start to change, we can come back and address those. But yeah, at the end of the day, what are we going to try and get to, and what are our core competencies that we want to sort of put in there? I can share that with the group as far as what the framework is, but that would then allow us to sort of look at this in a year's time and say, okay, what things have changed that we need to change, and has it affected what the long-term goals are for what we want to do with the library, if then we have to be doing some different things. But that's kind of how I see it. It's kind of where we want to be in 3 years, and where we want to be in 1 year, and what are the things that we need to do in order to do it. It's all in here, but it'll be a little bit more, give us a little bit more of a dynamic approach to looking at it.
Makes sense.
that sounds fine.
Okay. I think we've got got our plan framed there, and we'll certainly have additional meetings here, and I'll pull together a written version of what we've discussed so that we can have that in front of us at the next meeting. Then to jump to the survey. And Martha, do you want me to share over? It might be more efficient if you shared.
Yeah, I was planning on sharing.
Did you already claim? Here you go. I'm gonna make you co-host. There you
Okay. Okay. So I basically, oh,
If
sorry.
you haven't seen this yet, this should be in everybody's mailbox. This was sent out
Yep.
earlier this
Got it.
afternoon.
So I'm not sure on the board who knows this, but I'm about 8 months pregnant right now.
Oh, congratulations.
Especially, I mean, you see me like head up most of the time.
Yeah.
So we pushed the survey creation period up a bit. I'm going to be going on maternity leave at the end of March or whenever this person decides to arrive. And my goal is to basically have the survey completely ready to go live by the time I go on leave, and no one will have to do anything. It should be set to automatically go live on the date. And then as I was thinking about it, I don't think any of you were on the board when we last did the survey for 2018, right?
No.
Okay, so I figured I'd just briefly go over the timeline for what this entails. So what we've done so far is we have a staff committee, a staff survey committee, and we looked at the questions from the last survey. Typically, we've tried to keep the questions pretty similar from year to year, getting rid of stuff that's out of date and adding things as they come up, but trying to keep a similar base year to year so that we can compare data. And we basically kind of came up with a draft, which is what I'll show you tonight. And the goal tonight is to kind of iron out, does this look good? Are these the questions we want to ask? And then by the end of February, I'll put this all into a web form, and I'll send it out to the staff committee and the long range planning committee to just test and, let me know if anything's broken or if there are any issues or if I forgot something. And then by March, I'll have it ready to go on the website. I can set it to automatically open and close so no one will be able to, get in early, which I'm sure there's a line. And then it will be open from June 1st to August 31st. And basically from that time, all we have to do is kind of monitor the numbers and promote it. And then analysis will begin in the fall with the full report. Usually we do like a more in-depth presentation to the long range planning committee, and then it goes to the full board, and it's like a 10-minute highlights kind of thing that we've done in the past. Are there any questions about that? Oh,
That's good.
okay. So before reviewing the draft, our general structure of the survey, we say it will take about 15 minutes. I should probably time that because it's been a while since we've tested that. We have 4 sections. First is library building and physical materials. Second is digital resources and virtual spaces. So that includes the website. Third is programming. This year we've added outreach to that because outreach has kind of exploded since 2018, and it's more of a visible part of what we're doing. So that has been included in the programming section. And then the 4th and final section is overall rankings and demographics. Each major service point in each section asks users to rate how often they're using the service, and then their satisfaction on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being very unsatisfied and 5 being very satisfied. So what I'm going to do is basically just review major changes, which pretty much boils down to where we either eliminated or added something. And then there were a few things that I wanted to bring for discussion because there wasn't a consensus among staff. So this is just the intro. And I should also mention, when someone indicates that they are unsatisfied, there's a pop-up follow-up question that asks why. And that's true for all of these satisfaction rankings. So one question that we opted to eliminate was, in 2017, we had expanded our hours. And in 2018, we had a question about like, how often are you, did you know that we expanded hours? Are you using any of the expanded hours? This felt slightly irrelevant, 5 years later. So we got rid of it. There were also some follow-up questions about like, would you like to see further hours expanded? And the general consensus on the staff committee was that we're not really in a position to offer that right now. So it didn't make sense to open it up for discussion if it wasn't something that we could actually follow up on. So that was something we eliminated. Let's see. One additional question that we added for the physical space section was, do you have any other suggestions for how the library could improve its physical space? I found that with the previous survey, and this bore out with other editions of the survey, was we tended to get a lot of this feedback anyway, and it made sense to me to kind of put it all into one question so we can look at it in one place. And also there are some free response sections at the end of the survey, but I figured maybe if we asked this earlier, it might prompt some people who maybe have feedback but forget that feedback by the end of the survey. So we added that question. One point I wanted to bring for discussion was whether we wanted to ask any specific questions about fundraising or the building project. Staff was kind of split on this. We had half of us who were kind of like, oh, I don't know, it could be good data. I don't know what we would ask though. And another half that was like, well, I don't know if we need to ask that. So I don't know if there were any strong feelings on that. I figured it might be good to discuss since John's involved with the foundation.
Yeah.
I think maybe one of the larger hurdles is that the foundation is kind of at a transition point, and I don't know that anything we could ask right now would still be relevant in June.
Yeah.
And
It should. I mean, the foundation knows where it's going. It just doesn't know who all is going to be going with.
And the other thing too is I'm not sure if is this the best place to gather that data? Should the foundation be putting out its own data gathering endeavor? The other thing too is even we've never asked anything very specific about like we've got plans for the building, but we've still gotten feedback, so it's not like we'll not have data that can be used for that effort.
I mean, people respond with respect to space.
Yeah.
Even though we don't ask it.
We ask questions about space and what kind of features they'd like to see.
Yeah.
It's not framed in the context of like, because we're doing this special building project.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, I would say not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I will reject that change. I'll do it now so I don't forget. Whoops. Okay. So going into the next section with digital resources and virtual spaces. One thing that we missed with the 2020 survey that I wanted to throw out for discussion, and I have a feeling this is going to be another, like, maybe not relevant, but we redesigned the website in 2020, which would have been great if we had a survey that year, because we could have gotten relevant, timely feedback. And now it's 2 years later, and we haven't really had an opportunity to ask too much specifically about that. I mean, we got some, when the new design went live, we got a few like, oh, it looks nice, or this thing isn't working. And that was kind of the extent of it. So I wasn't sure that this was necessarily relevant. I wanted to get a reaction from the committee to see if this was something that we necessarily needed to ask about specifically, or if we could just extrapolate from, like, are you satisfied with the website?
Yeah, so it was redesigned 2 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah, that seems like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and 2 years ago from 2020 is like 10.
Yeah.
So.
You know, and at the time, if we'd asked in 2022, there could have been functionality that we would have had been, you know, we were still in the process of setup. There was functionality that we could have included or not included. And
Right.
I think at this point, it's, you know, we done did the website. There's, you know, all the big pieces are there, and I don't think that, you know, any results are going to change those.
Let's see. Then many of these other things I'm just going past because they're primarily superficial.
Yeah.
Let's see. So one thing that we have been, new addition, one thing we've been discussing on staff is, should we look into getting a library app? It's something that we've seen on some of our tech visits that other libraries have used for, like, self-checkout and some other functions. We wanted to get some information about patron interest, and also patron interest in specific features, just because some of the feedback that we'd heard from libraries was like, they got an app and nobody uses it. And since it costs money, you know, it was something we wanted to get a little bit more data on. So we've asked, you know, rate your interest in the library app. If they indicate that they're interested, what features would they be the most interested in? And then if they indicate that they're not interested, we ask why. Let's see. And then another question, or the final question that I've added in the demographic, no, not demographic, in the overall rating section was, usually in many of our surveys, we've gotten at least one person being like, I'm not sure that I know about all that you offer the community, or people just expressing that they'd like to know more about the library. So we added a question that basically says, hey, here's a list of stuff that we do. What have you heard that we do? To get a better idea on what kind of services we need to promote more, and are maybe flying under the radar.
I like this a lot, because I think it speaks directly to our constituents. So I'd even argue for pushing this further up to the top. And one other thought I had here, Martha, is you might want to reconstitute this into two groups, just looking at the list you have here, which is exhaustive and great, into, like, I don't recall the verbiage above, and I don't have it pulled up on my other monitor, but it was like efficacy and something else, and maybe we could tie that in, because some of these are like ease of life, you know, efficiency stuff, and other these like curbside pickup, no overdue fines, or like, you know, benefits to our community. You know what I mean? Like benefits of using the library versus not having to go to, Waukegan to get your license plate renewed.
Okay,
You see what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
services versus benefit. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I can definitely do both those things.
I think that'll emphasize them more, especially for people who don't realize,
Mhm.
you know,
Yep, I
oh
think
my
that's-
gosh, they've got all this stuff, license plate renewals, application passports. That's great. I told 3 people in the past month that we had a passports processing.
Oh.
They had no idea. And they were
Great.
thrilled. Yeah.
Good, that's good to know. Um,
My wife being one of them.
It starts at home.
It does.
And okay, so I will figure out a different place to put that other than at the end. And then the only other changes that we made that I wanted to point out was in the demographics section. We changed the question of sex to gender so that we could, so that people who are non-binary or gender non-conforming would have an opportunity to be represented. We also are going to change this to, like, you can check more than one. There's a place where you can write in if you are using identification that we're not providing. And then we did a similar thing with the race category where it will be, you can check more than one. We added a category for biracial or mixed race. And then we also corrected an oversight with.
Hey, are we missing Latino there?
Yeah, so it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even get to it.
No, it's fine. So Latino and Hispanic are typically not included in the race section because they're an ethnicity. So we just added that question so that we can capture that information while still being correct, I guess. And then that pretty much sums up the changes that we've made to the survey. So I guess, are there any questions or?
The only other thing I'd consider adding is how long have you lived in the community?
Oh, okay.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Let's see. I'll just put that in now.
Good suggestion.
I got one.
Okay. Oh, great. Yeah, that's good information for us to have.
That'd be helpful. Yep.
Any other questions or comments?
I think
Concerns?
good editing, I think.
Very comprehensive, and I like the 1 to 5. I'm a big fan of that on a Likert scale because what the heck does a 7 mean? You do 1 to 10, right?
Yeah. I'll stop my share.
Any other questions related to the survey? Okay.
How will people submit? Like, can people stuff the ballot box? I don't know that that's a relevant concern, but you know what I mean?
We have, it's basically the honor system.
Okay.
Honestly, getting people to sit down and do a survey is
Yeah.
tricky.
Yeah, and
So-
that's why I want to emphasize putting like the benefits up at the top because you know we
Okay.
got a little give with the take, right?
Yeah. So usually it's primarily online. We try to have a paper copy available for people who request it. Not many people do, occasionally someone will, but it's pretty much all of our, I would say at least 98% of our responses have been online. And then we'll also do an incentive where they can enter a raffle for we're going to do a Chamber of Commerce gift certificate, which then they can use at participating local businesses.
I like it.
Okay.
Eric and Martha, will we have a chance to review this and give you any subsequent feedback, or do we come out of this committee with finalizing these edits?
I mean, this can be a sort of like the next draft, what I was planning on doing was putting it into a web form that you can then test, and we
Perfect.
can still make changes at that point. It's not set in stone.
Thank you.
Mhm.
The goal is to have it finalized by the end of February, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect. That's not a goal. That's a hard deadline for Martha, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
With
a
some
lot
flex.
of this is very unpredictable.
Well, thanks for your work on this. It's
Oh,
good.
sure.
Yeah, no, you did a great job.
Sure.
Thank you, Martha.
Happy to do it.
Okay, so those are the items of business that we have for the long-range plan tonight. Is there anything else long-range plan wise that we need to discuss? Otherwise, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
When's the next meeting?
Well, we don't have one scheduled yet.
Okay, so would it be
How
after?
soon do we want to get together? Say sometime next month?
We're talking about February or March?
February? Towards the end of February?
Well, it might be good to meet just to sign off on the final version of the
Yeah.
survey. If there's
That
any
sounds good.
changes.
Martha, what would be a reasonable time frame for your workflow here? Would it be 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Yeah, 2 to
could-
3 weeks should be fine. Well, let's see. I'm doing
2
newsletter
days,
stuff.
3 hours?
I'm gonna say no on that. I think anytime after President's Day, the 21st would probably work for me, just because we're
Yeah.
we'll be finishing up the newsletter stuff in the next 2 weeks, and that makes things unpredictable.
Okay. So I will send out a poll then, looking for a day and time after President's Day to set up our next meeting.
Okay.
The only other question I had, Eric, before we look for motions, I did find some notes from our last meeting in June of 2021. We had discussed at that point setting up a steering team with representatives from both staff and trustees. And did we check the box on that, or has that been?
Oh, those were in the heady days when the COVID numbers were down to just a few hundred a day.
No.
Yeah, we were at that point looking towards really reworking the existing draft and looking at a scenario where it should be still fairly relevant.
Yep.
I think we've moved
Beyond that.
unfortunately, past
All
that.
right.
Yeah.
I'll motion to
We
adjourn
should-
then.
Yeah, we should still set up that steering committee, but it'll be more looking at feedback going into the draft.
Perfect.
I second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Meeting is adjourned at 7:53.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thanks.
All right. Bye now.
Everybody have.